I'm going to start recording. I know that Lauren will not be here. I don't see Alaire yet. I don't believe I heard from Alaire. I know that Sarah Downs will not be here, and Jake also emailed me this morning to indicate it. And actually, I see Barry here now. So you have a very solemn, very solid, and perhaps solemn quorum. So if you would like to get started,
sounds good.
Fine to do that.
Thanks everybody for making time for this. I will call to order this February meeting of the Basin 6 Basin Water Quality Council. As always, we'll start with introductions. So please, we'll go around. I can call on people in the order that I see them and just do an intro, your name, your organization, whether you're a voting member, and pronouns. So I'm Lindsay White. I'm with the Missisquoi Basin Association. I'm a voting member and my pronouns are she, her. Sarah Gratz, why don't you go ahead?
I am Sarah Gratz. I'm an Eco AmeriCorps service member at the Northwest Regional Planning Commission.
Kent.
Sorry, you got me with my mouth full of sunflower seeds.
There's Dan.
Kent Henderson, Friends of Northern Lake Champlain, voting member.
Mel.
Hi everyone, I'm Mel. I use she, her pronouns. I am with the Franklin County NRCD. I don't believe I'm a voting member, but Lauren might be. Okay.
Well, because Lauren is not here today, you are, but when your application is discussed, you won't be because you'll have to recuse yourself.
Right. Dan.
Oh, Dan Sheely from Richford, a voting member.
Bridget.
I'm already unmuted. There we go. Bridget Butler, FNLC, Executive Director, alternate. She, her pronouns.
Thank you. Barry.
Barry Lampe, Northwest Regional Planning Commission, voting member.
Ted.
Ted Siddell, he, him. I'm with the Orleans County Conservation District and voting member.
Great. Dave.
Yeah, Dave Allerton with the Town of St. Albans Public Works, and I don't think I'm a voting member, but anyway.
Thanks. Beth.
Sorry, I hit the wrong one. Beth Torpy, NVDA, I'm a voting member, she, her.
Great. Julie.
Hi, I'm Julie Medina. I'm the Stormwater Coordinator of St. Albans Town. I don't think I am the voting member.
Carolyn.
Sorry, we have two of us here in the office. I'm Caroline. I'm with FNLC. I'm the new project coordinator.
Welcome.
I'm Hannah. I'm the Eco AmeriCorps member for FNLC, and my pronouns are she, her.
And Jim.
Jim Pease, Vermont DC, retired. I was with the Clean Water Initiative program. Him, he.
Great. Thanks all. We will run through some of our standard meeting opening protocols and things like that, and then we'll get to the meat of the meeting. Please do try to keep your video on if at all possible so that we're fully engaged in this meeting. Raise hands either virtually or physically if you have something to say, like Dean is exempling.
I did want to just point out that Dave Allerton is an alternate for Sarah Downs, and because Sarah will not be here, he does in fact have voting abilities today.
Thank you, Dean.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, and I was wondering who our alternates were, so I appreciate that. I did not pull up that list prior to the meeting, so thanks for being on top of everything, Dean. This is the moment where folks can declare conflict of interest. It's now a standard part of our meetings. So if you have a conflict in any of the agenda items today, please declare them.
Is this where I would speak because I'm presenting the project? Okay.
Thanks, Mel.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm not experienced with this council alternate work. Yeah, I will be presenting one of our projects, so I guess that's a conflict of interest.
Thanks, Mel. And as Dean had pointed out, that just means you'll recuse yourself from voting on your own project. Any other conflicts or other declarations folks want to make? We don't. Oh, I'm jumping ahead on the agenda. So any revisions or adjustments to the agenda that anyone wants to propose? Hearing none, we'll move on. Actually, we'll give Alaire a big welcome. Alaire, you want to just put your name, state your name, organization, and you already have voting in your thing, but just officially record your presence here. Oh, maybe Alaire can't hear us.
I can hear you. I'm just trying to figure out my Zoom, which is getting all off track again. Yeah, I'm Alaire Diamond from Vermont Land Trust, and I'm a voting member.
Great, thank you. So next step will be approval of the minutes that Dean had sent out. So hopefully folks got a chance to look at them. If not, take a moment and go over them in the meeting packet that Dean had sent. And if folks have any comments, we would take them now. If there are no comments, we would take a motion to approve as written.
I move we accept the minutes as written.
Awesome. That's a motion from Dan. Is that a second from you, Kent?
It is.
Awesome. So we have a motion from Dan to approve the minutes as written, a second from Kent. All in favor, please indicate by raising your hand either virtually or in reality. And I am not sure I'm seeing everybody on screen, but I have Kent, Lindsay, Alaire, oh, thanks, Dean, Dan, Barry, Beth, Dave. Great. And Julie. So the minutes are approved as written. Next agenda item is public comment not related to anything on the agenda. So take this opportunity if you have things you want to bring before the BWIC that are not agenda items. Seeing none, we will move to if there are any new representatives or alternates needed to be seated, and I don't think there are, but please do correct me if I am mistaken.
You're all set.
Okay, great. Then the exciting part of the meeting is this application for funding. The BWIC received, or the QUISP received, one application during the fourth round of funding, and I will turn it over to Dean to introduce, and then Mel will, I think, be ready to answer any questions.
Yes, you have that right. I'm going to just say a few words. And then I don't know, Mel, if you have anything like slides that you want to share, or if you just, okay, so I'll get ready to do that. But your packets had a memo Your packets also included the application information that is submitted through the online form, and then all of the attachments. There was the corrected budget that I received that I sent in a follow-up email. And so hopefully people also received that. And I'm going to turn things over to Mel so she can do a presentation, and then we can have time for question and answers. And I'll have a few brief comments, and then it would be time for the council to take action on the request. And I'm just going to make sure now that Mel can share. And you should be able now, Mel.
Okay.
So take it away.
Let me know if you can see it in presentation mode.
I can.
Okay, great. Yeah, so the project I'm presenting today is a floodplain restoration project on Marsh Brook in the Lake Carmi watershed. The land is owned by the Department of Forest, Parks and Recreation. It's in Lake Carmi State Park, and it's near the mouth of Marsh Brook, in sort of a wetland-ish area, but we'll talk about current conditions later in the slideshow. So we have had some QUISP project development funds, by we I mean Franklin County NRCD, to look at a few projects in the Lake Carmi watershed, and this is one of them. And we've gotten very positive feedback from the landowner. So we've been working with Emily White and Jay Narenberg from FPR, and they're very enthusiastic about this project. So we've been able to move forward, hopefully, looking for preliminary design funding. So these are just a couple pictures of the area. This is a floodplain restoration project. The current condition, the channel is pretty incised, as you can see. Access to the floodplain is available only at moderate to high flows. This was identified by Stacy Pomeroy in her 2020 Marsh Brook Streamwalk report. So we visited the site with her and got her feedback, and she's still supportive of the project. And we've also included Julie Follensby from the Wetlands Program, who is also supportive of the project. Another thing just to note is that there's quite a bit of invasive reed canary grass in the area. So our proposed project would be to restore floodplain access through either two options: low-tech process-based restoration, so things like beaver dam analogs and post-assisted log structures. And you can see in the pictures, this is not at Marsh Brook, but this was a project that we worked with VLT on. And these are some examples of beaver dam analogs. And in the photo on the right, you can kind of see even the water level has changed in front of the beaver dam analog. And so that's just supposed to mimic natural features that would increase access to the floodplain. And then another option that we've considered based on Stacy's feedback is floodplain lowering, which is just excavation of the floodplain to, again, increase that floodplain access. And we would do our best not to disturb the existing trees in the area. And then just a smaller part of this project would be stream bank stabilization a bit upstream. Still in Lake Carmi State Park, there's this 5 to 6 foot eroding bank. And it's immediately upstream of riprap bank, the riprap bank for trail crossing on Marsh Brook. And yeah, so our idea for this area would just be to stabilize it through toe protection of the bank through tree revetments and planting of the upper bank. So probably live staking. And this photo is just an example of a willow live stake that we planted at another site that is growing very well. This is our project map, so I can share this with any folks who might have questions. The green area is where we would be doing the floodplain restoration. The red dot is where we would be doing the stream bank stabilization. And the purple area is where the aerator is located. So the aerator is obviously very important, very expensive infrastructure. So we would want to make sure in doing this project that we would not impact that area, and that would be part of the feasibility study and the preliminary design process. So what we're looking to do now, what we applied for was preliminary design. So that would involve an engineering consultation for an existing conditions analysis, an alternatives analysis, and then a conceptual design. And really what we're looking for with this is, you know, what's the best option? Should we stick with a low-tech process-based restoration? Should we do floodplain lowering? And we would hopefully get those answers through this process. And we are also anticipating the need for cultural historic review because of the area's general archaeological sensitivity. So that was also included in the budget. And then I just have the calculations here from the P reduction spreadsheet, the estimated year 1 P reduction, and then the estimated annual P reduction after year 1, just to share those with you. And if you have any questions, this is my contact information. So yeah, that's everything I have to share.
Thanks, Mel. And as far as things that I would have to share, I have put in the file and I didn't, but I will send a updated memo, updated version of the memo that I included in the packet with the corrected budget amounts. But essentially what I wanted to share with the group is going to be something that you'll see here. And hopefully people can see a table. So the work of the Basin Council and the QUISP is focused on phosphorus reduction. And the main measure of that is dollars per kilogram for entire project costs, or at least those costs that are funded by DEC clean water funds. With a project at this early stage, it's difficult to know what the cost effectiveness is because we don't have a solid understanding of what the total project costs would be. Nevertheless, I did reach out to Lauren as I was putting together materials for this, and she did give me an initial range in costs, which I have used to come up with what I would call very preliminary cost effectiveness measures. As Mel said, 16.5 kilograms of annual phosphorus reduction on the low end of the budget, which is taking the cost for this phase and then adding an amount that Lauren had mentioned. We're talking about 62,000, which, if that were to be the case, has a good cost effectiveness. In my estimation, it's about $3,800 per kilogram. At the high end, somewhere in the neighborhood of 142,000. The cost effectiveness goes to 8,600 and change per kilogram. So I wanted people to just have an understanding of that. If anybody was curious about, well, where does this project fit? In previous meetings, we have looked at tables that have data for projects that have been implemented in years past. It's somewhat out of date, but overall cost effectiveness for projects is in the neighborhood of $14,000 or $15,000 per kilogram, even not adjusted for inflation. So the relative cost effectiveness of a project like this one would seem to be quite good, which is a main reason why the recommendation of QUISP staff is that the council approve it for funding.
I got a question.
Yeah, Dave. If it's for me.
Just kind of an overall question, I guess. How much money do you have to spend for projects? And is it on a yearly basis, or can you just explain that again to us?
Sure. Yeah. The clean water service providers in these startup years theoretically have an amount that's available, I'll say, per contract year. So we have signed 2 contracts, even though we can't spend the money in year 2 until year 1 money. But essentially, in round numbers, the Missisquoi Basin has about $1.5 million for projects. That's putting aside the amount that goes for program administration and for project development. things like that. So round numbers, it's $1.5 million per year. And I don't have the number right in front of me, but we have not spent anywhere close to the full amount in year one, and we haven't therefore even gotten close to starting to tap year two. And there will be a year three and a year four and a year five, at least, given what we know about this program and the term that the clean water service provider will be in business.
Yeah. And is there a schedule for this project? I mean, are you planning to do like the design feasibility kind of work this year and then construction next year? Or is it the plan to get it all done this year? I'm just curious on that too.
I believe, anything can change, but I believe that we would be doing the design work this year and maybe construction next year. I know that unexpected archaeological review can sometimes really delay these kind of projects. So that's why we've included it. But yeah, we would like to probably have the design this year and the construction next year, but that depends on how the design and review goes.
Sure.
Kent, go ahead.
Thank you.
Sorry, go ahead.
I've got a couple questions. On determining the cost that you and Lauren came up with, am I correct in understanding that the cost includes the 30% design, the 100% design, and the construction cost? It will include all phases. Is that the cost number that we're talking about?
I believe so. Oh, sorry, Dean, if you had something to add. I was just going to say, I think that it was a really wide range at this point, because something like low-tech process-based restoration would be really relatively cheap. And something like floodplain excavation would obviously be a lot more expensive.
Yeah, that's basically what I would say, Kent. And it is a kind of order of magnitude estimate, without spending a lot of time, just recognizing that we don't know enough at this early stage. But I was trying to give council members some indication of the order of magnitude of the cost effectiveness.
Okay,
that's the short of it.
Okay, no, that's a good explanation. It's a great project. But I'm getting comments, and I am just going to maybe make a comment based on some of the reactions that I'm hearing from my board and other interested citizens. Is I'm being asked how much of the budget is actually going into construction, actual implementation, versus going into design and engineering on this sort of project. And so I think it would be helpful when I go back and explain to taxpayers and citizens that are looking at this process, if I can have some information to that. And I'm not just singling this one project out, because we're going to be getting many more like this. And I think it's information that I'm going to need in order to be really supportive of this process. So that's a comment and a question that I wanted to get in the record. I'm really interested in the map. And I'm kind of familiar. I've been down to that area before. And in fact, I've taken my granddaughter out there ice skating. That's a real neat place to go down. It's a real still area. I'm curious what the whole basin is that the brook drains. Are there agricultural lands in that basin, or is it residential, or is it all state park? Is it all recreational forested land that drains into this Marsh Brook?
I believe it's a combination of land use. There is certainly agriculture. From what I know about, I didn't walk the stream myself, but when Stacy walked it, she said it was in relatively good condition. Yeah. But we are currently doing project development for upstream projects as well. So
Okay,
things like riparian buffer plantings on ag land.
okay. Yeah, I'm pretty impressed with picking out that particular area because I think there are a lot of land use that will benefit from this. But that brings the question, how much of a sediment load is coming through there? Like the photos are on some pretty nice still days. And it looks really clear right there. And I know where my granddaughter goes skating. It's absolutely crystal clear in that area. It's very impressive. But I'm just curious if there's a sediment load that's being anticipated that this will slow down as well.
I currently don't have an answer for that.
Okay, all right. And then also, could you point out or have you considered the location of the park septic system?
No, when we did a site visit with Emily White, who is, you know, the FPR staff who's, I think, managing that park, and she didn't mention that. So I don't think it's nearby or would be an issue, but it's certainly something we can check on.
Okay. And I've got one last comment, and that is, as far as the historical assessment is concerned, is the soil, or is there really going to be any excavation on this site? Or is it simply the addition and plantings that are going on? And like when we're dealing with these historical assessments, that's one of the first questions is how deep are you going to dig? And I'm just kind of curious, what the structures they're going to be put in place here is how much excavation is going to be done that would require this sort of assessment.
Sure. So that's not something we have an answer to right now. We would really need the engineering consultation to determine, which form of floodplain restoration is actually feasible in this area. If we went with the floodplain lowering route with the excavation, then you're right. I think there would be a lot more archaeological review, but it's just not something we are certain of at this time without the engineering consult.
Okay, thanks. Very good. I'm done. My turn's over.
Okay, Ted, I think you're up next.
Okay, comment on Kent ask a really good question, and that is like, what is the full cost of from project development to construction and finally? I've gone through this exercise with Patrick Hurley at MWA, and we start backwards with what we think the implementation cost is going to be based on the techniques we're using. So low intensity projects like BDAs or PALs, those kind of structures where you can get the materials on site. You're really just paying for labor in that case with some material. The minute you bring in Tonka trucks and large toys, your price starts jacking up quite a bit more. So we look at what is it going to take to do some of the engineering and construction and go from those costs backwards. And then we get to what is it going to cost for the 70 to 100% design range. And usually that's in the 30 to 40,000. And then we go back to maybe up to 30% design. And that's sometimes if you can do the design in-house, those costs come down significantly to about $10,000. And that's the way we're approaching that in the Mem for Magog, is we go backwards stepwise with what we think those costs are going to be from, what is the technique you're using really drives the cost. I'm done.
Alaire?
Thanks. Yeah, great conversation. And looks like a really cool project. It's really exciting to see like a Beaver Dam analog wood addition project come to the Quist, and to start to just kind of see that become like more of a formal type of project. I guess I don't, it's just wanting to raise something for discussion. I'm like in support of this project for sure. One thing that I am just concerned about overall, and not with this specific one, is just the idea, you know, several of us on in this group were out at that Sheldon site doing that project last year. The idea with the Beaver Dam analog, post-assisted log structure, low-tech process-based restoration is that it's not something that requires an engineer, you know, like a licensed engineer or any kind of like specific that level of like money, honestly. You know, it's paying somebody $140 an hour or something like that to design those. The idea is that we, as a community of practice, can work with each other, can develop those skills. There's trainings. It's very low tech, and I just have a little bit of thinking like, okay, maybe this project is one way to put this technique, get it a little to be recognized, to be more official, put it through its paces, to be funded in this way. But I do just like have a general concern that I just want to share with all of you about going into the future and having process-based restoration projects needing to like require an engineering design, because they shouldn't. The whole theory behind it is that that's not, they're able to be low cost and low tech. So I just want to name that. I think this project, it sounds like because of the floodplain lowering as an alternative to explore it, all of that feels really reasonable. And it's really cool to see you guys thinking about like all of those different techniques and like what combination of them is going to be the best in terms of phosphorus reduction. So I'm in support, but just wanted to like name that as an idea and something for us to think about going forward. I'm done with that. Thanks.
Thanks, Alaire. Carolyn, before I get to you, Ted, did you have a response to Alaire?
Yes. Can we get DEC on board with not requiring engineering costs for these low tech things? That would be a huge boon if we could get the river group, the watershed group, on board with that, because I tend to think, and especially getting DC in early and often, we could probably eliminate those huge engineering costs and go straight to implementation if that's all we're doing.
Yeah, sorry, can I just respond? Is that okay?
Yes, this is a back and forth.
Okay. Well, I don't know if Lindsay wanted to.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, Ted, I think we can. I mean, at least with Stacy, like she's been part of every process-based restoration project I've worked on, just they've been in her area. And none of them have had any engineering. It's always been like me or like Shane from TNC or other people. I know Patrick works on these too, and I haven't worked with him specifically, but yeah, she's never been like, we need to have an engineer. Like seems fully on board with just the idea that just doing this, it's about getting structures in, it's about getting wood in, and it does require some technique and some learning and some strategy, but not, it doesn't need engineering plans, it doesn't need CAD, it just needs like some thoughtful planning.
Yeah,
so
okay.
and I would love to see, I mean, I looking at your budget, Mal, I mean, I could see that being like, instead of 30,000 for an engineer, it could be, 150 hours for you to design the project. I mean, I would be thrilled to support that, like, and I could see that into the future too. That you, Lauren, like many of us in this group who are building our skills around these techniques could then be the practitioners and the designers of the project. And sometimes it's good to, definitely when you're thinking about excavation and things like that, maybe there needs to be some engineering in there, but I don't think that it needs to be a required part of these projects. And I just hope we can all see that. And I'm glad to hear your comment, Ted, which feels aligned.
If I could just quickly respond, and my apologies if there's noise in the background. I live in Burlington and there's construction on both sides of my building. So yeah, I was just curious about either Ted's or Alaire's thoughts on this. Obviously it's supposed to be low tech, but when there's something like, for instance, in this project, there's the aerator infrastructure, and that's, multiple millions of dollars, pretty close to the project area. So I'm wondering, like, even if it was low tech, I don't know if I would have the confidence to design that to ensure that such an expensive infrastructural, that the expensive infrastructure wouldn't be impacted.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I could see just different ways to approach it. I mean, I think the way that you're approaching it is kind of a classic way. It's like, okay, we want to do this thing. Let's get some engineers. Let's have them look at some stuff, come up with alternatives, and present those alternatives. And it's this very like expensive and produces some cool looking drawings. But it also could be you come up with a design, and then maybe there's a smaller line item for the engineer to look at your design and consult with you on it. And with those specific pieces that you identified as needing that level of oversight. Because I agree, like something like infrastructure, or if there's a road nearby, or that all of those things, like they do sometimes require perspective that you or we may not have. But just thinking like different models of putting those together, not necessarily like, oh, I think we can be more empowered, like empower ourselves to do it, and then use the engineers as a consultant to provide the information that they really are like best suited to provide, and not have to do the other stuff. It also helps with their capacity, because I think there is limited engineering capacity for this kind of work. So I think it could just build a larger community of all of us doing this work. That would be my thought on that.
Cool, thank you.
If there are other folks that want to respond to this topic, please do so now, but I do want to keep going with the questions in the order that I saw the hands raised.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Lindsay, I didn't know if you saw Jim, Julie, and I had hands up.
Yes.
Oh, and
Yeah,
Carolyn too.
Yes, Carolyn's been up for a while. Yeah, I'm keeping track of the order. I just wanted to not leave this topic and move to another one if there were folks that wanted to weigh in.
Well, my comment is somewhat related, but I imagine others may be the same.
Well, if it's
My comment's
related
to historical assessment, so very different.
Okay, Carolyn's going to change the topic.
If Dean wants to continue on this topic first, he's more than welcome to.
So Jim, is yours on the same topic?
Yeah, I had two questions. That Caroline was before me, but
well, sorry, specifically, I want to make sure that we're not leaving this discussion about getting engineering to do work on this. Obviously, we're going to keep talking about this application.
Well, it's related to the engineering question. Just that Ted brought up the fact that there are market differences between obviously this lower key project and excavating the soil, and whether you need an engineer or not. But I would point out that at least in my time, and I don't know what's going on now, but you do have to get an Army Corps permit for even the and whatever you called them, the check dams, what are they called? BDAs. That's new, I guess. But so you do need to show that you do need to document that. And I don't know that Carolyn, or not Carolyn, but I'm sorry, Mel could do it, fill out the application, but sometimes an engineer is useful for that. That's all I'm going to say in that area. And then I just had one other question with Dean on the phosphorus estimate. Obviously, the lifespan, if you go with the BDA project, is limited based on the lifetime of the wood. So I don't know whether the phosphorus estimate includes that number or not. I know that DEC was really, trying to determine, whether projects were long-term, whether they're interim, what was the lifespan of that project. Clearly, if it's excavation, it's going to have a much longer life than the check dams, which will only be for 5 to 10 years, I would guess. That's it.
Yes, and I will say, Dean, we mentioned this in our application as well. Stacy Pomeroy brought up similar concerns about project longevity, so we're just going to be, fully communicating with her throughout this process to make sure that's something that we can address as much as we can.
Does that cover you, Jim? Yeah, I just wanted to quickly say that, working backwards from the end result is a nice idea. It can work sometimes, but sometimes the design process shows you that you have to adapt the project to fit things like permitting requirements. So you may need to, if you're going to use that approach, come backwards in time with two very different types of projects, because so much is going to depend on what is permittable. I also just wanted to make the plug, don't conflate designers with engineers. As far as I know, there aren't very many PE requirements in this work. A key thing is, we live in this world where we have to be mindful of DEC requirements, like the eligible project types and how many steps a kind of approach is broken down into. And I would just say those are in development, evolution, whatever your favorite word is. And so, certain project types you can jump straight to implementation, but others, at least for now, go through a multi-step process. And that's just the world that we live in. It does mean more costs, but maybe we will get to the point where there are more of these go straight to implementation categories. I'll shut up and step aside.
Lindsay, I think you might be muted.
Thank you. Yes. So in closing on this particular topic, Alaire put in the chat, the Army Corps permitting process for low-tech process-based restoration projects does not typically require an engineer. And Carolyn, let's switch over to stormwater.
Historical permitting, actually. So
Oh,
I
sorry.
guess no, it's okay. I guess and this might already be common knowledge for some of the folks in this call, but I guess how are these historical assessment costs were they wrapped into your 30% design costs, or were they wrapped into the overall through implementation costs? And then kind of either way, at what step in that historical assessment process did you estimate cost through? Because I know this is something we're running into, it's definitely an iterative process where, you can think it might just be a preliminary review form, but it turns out that you need a phase one. And then I guess kind of building on that question, how does the historical assessment process interface with the QUISP funding, step-by-step process? Is there a certain, say you put in a preliminary review form, you need an ARA, you need a phase one, but otherwise everything in the 30% design is pretty much ready to go. Are you able to apply for QUISP funding for 100% or implementation if you're waiting on that? Or is that something that you need to complete as a deliverable before you can move forward? Sorry, I don't know if that was clear, but Dean, you might have some experience with that.
Yeah, there was a lot that I'm not sure I kept track of everything, but and I was just trying to pull up the budget. There is a budget for this phase of design that I take is meant to address the questions that will have to be answered for the Division for Historic Preservation to sign off on the intended design, because they're either going to sign off on the intended design or they're going to say no, and they're going to have to be pulling back on what the design is to something that's permittable, or maybe even stopping entirely, which would mean that they're doing some investment in historic and cultural review now, and potentially they will have to come back if the response of DHP is that, yes, well, we want you to go one step further. So we, as a QUISP, are, we don't say you only get the money once, if that's what I'm understanding is part of the question, but it does increase the cost and therefore does reduce the cost effectiveness. Although, the history of information projects didn't include that, so we have to adjust. If cultural assessment is now a new thing, we have to look back at all of those old projects and some sort of theoretically adjust them upwards to have a fair comparison with what things will cost now. So to try to wrap up, I think it was $6,500 for this phase. Mel, is that right? Or roughly that?
Roughly, yes.
Yeah. So that, and the reason why there was a reissued budget was that there was a problem with one of the formulas and it didn't include that in the total. So that explains the difference in the number between the initial budget and the one that is, technically the final budget. So the costs were there, but they just weren't showing in the total. And that's where we are now. We have an overall estimate of the costs, but like Mel said, if this comes back as a very limited project because of permitting issues or archaeological issues, we will have a new set of numbers. And I'm going to try to tie back to one other thing too. And Karen's here and she may have some thoughts on this. This whole thing with trying to use phosphorus estimates and cost effectiveness, it's really hard because we have a set of numbers that's gross. It's at this phase, and we'll have a different set of numbers at the next phase that's hopefully less gross and closer to what the end result will be. And that's all we can do, because we won't know what the numbers that DEC actually uses until the project's done.
Well, I was going to add to that, if you'd like. For one, and then trying to get your question right, Carolyn, knowing what deliverables are required, it's in the Clean Water Fund Policy Appendix B. So you can, for each project type, you can figure out what the deliverables need to be to complete that project. And then that they would also have to be completed so that I could provide a watershed projects ID for the next phase. So it's all clearly set out for each project type. And please call me if you have questions about that. And in terms of sort of the rationale behind it, because I think it all makes perfect sense, is that we need to ensure the integrity of each of these programs. Like, for rivers, how do we fix rivers? Well, these are the deliverables we need to make sure that project is going to meet the goals of the river, so equilibrium, but also that we understand that we're using our money well, because we are going into the next phase, having a general sense of what the cost is going to be, at least for implementation. But if phosphorus reduction is enhanced and we get a better number, that's also going to be important information. Now, when we wrote Appendix B, we weren't so worried about phosphorus numbers, because it was like, well, it's a good project. It's going to reduce phosphorus, for the block grants. So go ahead and fund it. But the WICs may want to see in that list of deliverables actually additional deliverable to require a phosphorus reduction, because we know that phase of the project, that initial design for like strategic wood addition, it's going to give us a much better number by magnitudes than the initial estimate. And so it may also be important for you all to actually think about adding on additional deliverables to help you. And just keep in mind that as Dean said, it can be rough, but with magnitudes of difference, because you've got better information, that's when you want to make sure you're asking for those deliverables.
Can you get us a copy? I'm trying to find that Appendix B somewhere.
So
can you
go ahead
post
and
that?
go. Well, it'd be better for you all just remember, if you want any information, resources, tools that are going to help you as a project implementer, just Google CWIP grant resources. It should be under that. You have a whole page of resources, and one of them includes that Appendix B, and they update it periodically. So it's not like a download that you don't want to have it as a download. You want to keep going back to the link periodically. Does that make sense? And Ted, if you still can't find it. Oh yeah, somebody, Bridget, thank you. So she gave you the actual link to that. But
thank you, Bridget.
Yeah, but definitely understand that all your resources are on their front page facing web page for grant resources.
I guess, yeah, and kind of to get more explicit, part of my question is, we have some archaeological reviews that, like phase ones, that due to the nature of the archaeology can't be done for a few months. But as you know, several of these rounds of QuIS funding are coming up. So watershed groups eligible to apply for, say, implementation or next phase funding if there is an outstanding archaeological review that otherwise all of the deliverables have been completed, all the permitting is done, but due to the nature of the archaeology, it cannot be performed yet?
We have, in the past, we've approved for block grants. We've approved people to go on to the next phase if they've been in contact with a permitter. And they've basically said, yeah, you know, there's a pretty good chance that you're not going to have any issues here. I mean, that's up to the QUISP to determine whether they feel comfortable with that. But what you're looking for, I think, as Dean has said, that you want to know if there's going to be something thrown at you that's like a no-go. So either that, or in the next phase, as part of the deliverables or the steps, that Dean could include a step saying the first deliverable has to be that permit, and you can't do anything else. We're not going to pay you for anything else until we get that permit. And then that is helpful, because then you can at least cut your losses if the worst happens.
That clarifies it. Thank you.
Yeah, if I can just add on, you know, it's good to hear Karen say what she said, that sometimes there is this accommodation made. And I guess Karen, by that you mean you'll give it an ID number. Because the ID number, it's either in the database or it's not. And if a project is in the database and it's, you know, it's satisfied the person who is putting those IDs in, then I think we would consider it. It is a deliverable, so it would be tough for the QUISP, as things are done now, to say something is required, but then take it back and say, well, no, we aren't really going to require it. But going forward, if someone came in with a project that had some work done in a different program and it had the ID number, then yeah, we would seriously think about saying it qualifies and can go forward. But this idea of saying to the applicant, the very first thing you're going to do, even though you love this project and you want to start designing it, is the cultural piece. That's an interesting idea. I'm not sure. I mean, I think it would have to be very specific to the project, because not every project will have that need, but it's an interesting idea.
We just in terms of just making sure that all the information is followed through in the project description, if a permit is still required, but they're working on it, then I'll put language to that effect in the project description, that this project is, you know, a go or whatever, if this permit is received. But yeah, we do want to see at least a letter saying, yeah, we've been in contact with them. We know we have to do this. We understand you know, everybody's not thinking it's going to be an obstacle.
Any other comments or questions about this project or the related topics?
So I have a question.
Go for it, Dave.
So I think this is a great project, but as far as moving it forward, do we approve, what are we looking to approve here? A dollar amount? You know, do we need to approve a smaller amount for them to do the preliminary work they need to do, and then save the rest for next year when they want to construct it? Or how all does that work?
So if I can jump in, Lindsay, yeah, the WIC is considering the request that has been made, and the request that has been made is for that adjusted budget amount. The only real question for the BWIC is, do you think, given all that you have heard and understand about this project, that it's worth spending this $42,000 for this proposed phase? That's the question. The additional money for construction, and the thing is that it's an amount that they don't have to spend if there was some early discovery that said, oh, you know, this more ambitious project is just not in the cards, that might mean that they only spend half of the budget. So there is always that possibility, although maybe it's not likely. The question though, when we know what the project in its implementation scope is, we'll come back, or we'll go to some other source for funding, but presumably we'll come back to the BWIC with a different number requested to carry the project forward.
Go ahead, Kent.
I move that the WIC follow the recommendation of the QUISP and adopt this project as presented today by the Conservation District.
I second.
That. Yep.
We've got a motion from Kent, a second from Alaire, a third from Dave. At this time, are there any other questions, concerns, comments?
I'll recuse myself.
Thank you. Please note that Mel has recused herself from voting. We will take a vote. Please indicate with a raised hand, virtual or otherwise, if you would like to approve that motion. So we've got Beth, Alaire, Julie, Dan, Lindsay, Kent. Oh, people are moving. Barry, Dave, Ted. I think that's all. Looks like approval with the recusal of Mel in her seat. All right. Thanks for that good discussion. Thanks for that exciting application, Mel. And the BWIC is happy to follow the lead of the QUISP and move this project forward. Back to the agenda items. Budget adjustments, I believe, is next. Is that correct, Dean?
Sorry, I think I am unmuted now. Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah, this is perhaps a little bit too much concern on my part with style over substance, but the council had taken an action on this policy on budget adjustments, and it was done using the table. And with the Lamoille Basin, which has done something similar, they had the language for the proposal in policy format. And I just wanted to give the council the opportunity, if it wanted to do something similar. So there was a short memo, and then there was the policy that you adopted in its table form in policy format. And that's all that I'm looking for, is if there was some interest or willingness on the group's part to do that, then you've had it in your meeting packets what this policy will look like, which I'm bringing forward, which I think people can see now. Can you see it? Yeah. So it's like I say, it's avoiding me a situation where I'm assuming that this is what you have said yes to. You said yes to the table, but this is the policy in its written form. And so if someone would make that motion, it would just make me have a little less discomfort with doing it without the approval.
Folks want a few moments to look over this, or does someone want to make a motion to approve this written policy?
I move that we accept the policy.
Okay, we have a motion from Dan. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Blair has seconded. All in favor of accepting this policy as written, please indicate with a show of hands. Got Beth, Alaire, Lindsay, Kent, Mel, Dan, Dave, Barry. I think I got everybody. And Ted, sorry. Thank you, guys. All right.
Yes,
Uh,
thank you all.
Phosphorus Crediting, Dean.
Yes. Oops. This is informational. And because it does tie in somewhat with the conversation that we were having earlier about just the challenges associated with phosphorus estimation. I wanted people to have access to this information. So Dan Elbrecht, who does the same type of work I do, but for the Basin 5 Council, had submitted a list of questions to DEC concerning the timetable for development of the phosphorus estimation tools, I guess is one way that I would put it. So I just thought it was important because some of you might have had the same questions. The QUISP funds that we receive in each basin, the amount is based on the possibility of us working in a wide range of areas. It's just that it has taken DEC some time for things to gel so that we can actually receive applications in those areas and process them. And there are some areas where, and project types where we have, it's an eligible project type, but it's not something that we can process applications for. And I just wanted people to have that information. The summary really boils down to, for river corridor easements, people can use the FFI tool, the Functioning Floodplain Initiative tool, to develop that information. But we are not actively pursuing things like river corridor easement projects because there's work going on with DEC in that area. So we're waiting before we are going to be doing any types of river corridor easement projects. So if you use that Appendix B that was mentioned earlier and you look at the projects that are eligible for formula fund, it would show up, but that's kind of the promise of it being eligible. Just wanted to make that point. River corridor easements are not the same as the river corridor or stream corridor type projects like we were just discussing. Different but related type. And it's not in play at present. So I just wanted people to have that information. We do not have the ability at the present time to do any easements that would go, let's say, for a forested area outside of the corridor. That may be something that someday would be eligible, but we're not there. There's no established method for estimating phosphorus reduction for conservation easements on forest land. Maybe someday, if there is, it would enter into the mix. We aren't doing it for agricultural lands. Wetlands is another area where there are estimating tools for phosphorus reduction for wetlands in association with floodplains, but there isn't a similar methodology, although one may be in development for wetlands outside of floodplains. So we are waiting for the development of the estimation tool. So I'm just going to pull back a little bit and say we're breaking new ground with the work that we're trying to do. We have all this funding. It's kind of burning a hole in our pocket. But like Karen said, we're trying to use the money responsibly. And one key factor in that is having tools that help us, as best we can, estimate cost effectiveness, but then constantly update things. So anyway, this is maybe dwelling it on too much. I wanted people to have the information. And if there are questions about specific parts of it, I would say you can either address them to me and I will get them to DEC, or since you have the emails, you could contact folks at DEC directly, but I might encourage you to take the first approach. Is that? I
Thanks,
don't see
Dean,
it.
and thanks for sending that information along. It was good to read that conversation. You're still in the hot seat for the next item, the Clean Water Network Summit, although hopefully folks have seen that. You did send out one of Jack's messages, I believe everyone on screen should have received.
Yeah, I'm realizing I had intended to share something earlier, but I did not. But yes, the Clean Water Network Summit, please sign up if you intend, hope or intend to attend. There's also a draft agenda on the same webpage if you follow that link. Something I'm sorry to say is that we were given the impression that there might be a remote option, or this would be a hybrid meeting, and that's no longer the case, evidently because of some limitations with the venue where this event will be taking place. And at present, there are no plans to record it either. So if it's something that you want to be part of, then being there in person is the way you will have to do it. We have been pushing for some of these things in the process and trying to shape the agenda. We found it a little bit frustrating, but still are hopeful that it's going to be a good event and would be worth your time. So please consider doing that. And there will be a slot on the agenda for reports from each basin. And so we will be working with the chair and vice chair on how that time is actually going to be used.
Great, thanks for that. And if folks are concerned about what's going on but cannot attend, just reach out. We can certainly, despite the fact that's not being recorded, keep good notes or something like that. I'm planning to be there, so at least we'll have some representation, and I'm happy to do the best I can to report back if folks are not able to attend.
That kind of stinks for those of us who can't go. I was looking forward to that and to cohort with the other WICs. So it's very disappointing that in this day of technology that can't be figured out.
I'm glad that you say that, Beth, because I'm agreeing with you. I do agree with you. And I haven't given up on it. But I also was sure to check in with DEC yesterday so that I had my understanding of what they considered the most up-to-date information. But we're gonna continue to advocate for it in some way if it's at all possible, because it does seem like it should have been, yeah, a major.
Yeah, I would agree with that. With the amount of technology that we have now to live stream things and to record and all of that, there really shouldn't be a reason not to.
Plus, Vermont in the winter driving is, a lot of people are going to be driving from a long way. We're up in the Northeast Kingdom, so minimum 2 hours any place we go. And I know it's not your fault, Dean. I'm not beating you up. I'm just providing input.
No, I didn't take it that way, and I'm looking for as much ammunition as I can get. So I consider that helpful ammunition.
Right. Updates. Dean, you want to update us on the
a few things. I didn't I kicked myself because something I had been to share to explain the material on project development. There's a somewhat new document that DEC has released that is about project development. It is perhaps in the weeds for some of you, but for others it might not be. It does clarify things like the use of QUISP funding for project development. And I'm just thinking that if some of you who are interested in this topic, either specifically with project development or just the project development process overall, perhaps it could be a topic for an upcoming meeting. I just also wanted to quickly update on cost effectiveness. There had been the request made of the basin councils for input on this idea of a cost effectiveness threshold. I just wanted to touch base on that again. The comments are starting to trickle into DEC from the councils. It is not something that the councils are finding particularly easy or necessarily time to do. They think that more experience processing application is needed before we can say what a cutoff point might be. DEC has floated an idea, something like $100,000 as a breaking point between projects that would go to QUISP requests versus enhancement requests. But I have a meeting on Friday where I think some of this may be explained further. But I just wanted to update folks on that. And then the last thing has to do with the adoption of projects. We've talked about that a little bit. We're still waiting the issuance of further DEC guidance on that. And I do imagine us talking about it more extensively before too much time goes by. And I could also see the possibility of the council possibly adopting some kind of policy that makes that process a little bit simpler for those who get projects funded. I did want to just say one other thing as a heads up. Some of you have, and maybe all of you have been hit with emails or calendar invites. There were some issues with the recurrence of calendar invites. I have currently on my computer too many meeting notices related to this group. And so I'm just giving people a heads up. You're going to get, or you may get something in your email or your calendar that says meetings of the QUISP are canceled, but don't be alarmed. It's one of the extraneous, and it doesn't really mean that we aren't having meetings. It's just that the wrong meeting notices are going away. So please don't worry about that. And I don't know if there are anything else that anyone else has, but that was it for me. I do see some comments. Let me just see if Karen, I've developed an outline of the project development document and not DEC approved. So, okay, if someone wants a decoder ring for that document, Karen evidently has one, but it's not official. And that's all for me.
Great. Karen, if you're willing to share, I'd love to see the decoder ring. Sounds like Bridget seconds that idea. Great. That's actually all of our agenda items. So unless there's other business that folks want to bring up, we can end early. It's impressive. We had some really thorough and thoughtful discussions and still have time on our hands. Fantastic. If no one has other things, then I'll take a motion to adjourn early.
I move to adjourn.
All right. Is there a
I second.
Okay, we've got a motion from Alaire, a second from Ted. All in favor, raise virtual or real hand. Lindsay, Kent, Mel, Dan, Dave, Julie, Alaire, Beth, Barry. I think that's everybody. Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Congrats to the Conservation District. Go get them, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
That's
that's posted.
And next time we meet, I'll try to start the meeting with the chinchilla in evidence.
Awesome. Have a good day, everyone.
Bye,
Thanks,
guys.
everyone. Have a good day.
Bye.